spooky friends. So glad to be back after our winter break. We missed you monsters so much, and we hope you had a spectacular holiday season and that your 2023 is off to a great start. There's nothing better than finding a way to connect with fellow true crime loving weirdos, and that's precisely why we created our own true crime cults.
But don't worry, we're not into any of that sleep deprivation or diet control stuff. You've landed in the only cult with unlimited naps and snacks. Grab a flower crown, cozy up with one of our baby goats, and settle in for another story on the subject that brought us all together, murder.
In case you don't know us yet, I'm your favorite true crime pixie, Angelina, and I'm hanging out with the real housewife of true crime, Aurora. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good. Yeah, we are recording a little bit in advance, but I can say that probably while this is being released and listened to, my kitchen floor is likely being replaced. So
Yay.
This is great. Great timing because we are not trying to record stuff. So new floor, no interruptions.
That
Win-win.
is good timing. And while this is being listened to, I will be on a beach in Mexico.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah. Hey, both are good.
Yeah.
Just because you tune into our show every week, we like to think of you as honorary monsters. But if you want to make it official, you can join the MMN commune on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/MurderMurderNews to sign up. And in return, we'll give you a shout out on the show, name one of our baby goats in your honor, and of course, you'll have exclusive access to our regular patron-only content.
We're still getting a feel for what works on Patreon. In November, we had a Wednesday watch party. In December, we told you an incredible Christmas survivor story, and we're still deciding what comes next. If you haven't already, you can head to murdermurder.news/survey to let us know what you want to hear on the podcast or see on Patreon. Before we dig in, we want to offer a quick disclaimer. Though we joke about forming a true crime cult, that is not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, and we want you to know that we take the cases we're discussing very seriously.
We want to deliver each story with the utmost respect to victims and anyone involved. If you feel we've missed the mark, you don't like our tone, or if you notice we've gotten any details wrong, let us know with a quick email to murdermurdernews@gmail.com and we'll make it right.
Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include racism and gun violence. So if either of those subjects are particularly sensitive for you, you may want to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead.
4 years ago today, Jocelyn Watt, a Northern Arapaho woman living on the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, was shot in her home. Her sister Jade and her mother Nicole found themselves championing the way for missing and murdered indigenous women, while Jocelyn's case sat unsolved, garnering very little media attention. As the two fought for answers to Jocelyn's murder, things got worse when Jade came up missing almost a year to the day after her sister's death. She was later found dead in the middle of nowhere, with police ruling her cause of death as accidental as so many other indigenous women before her. No mother should have to grieve the loss of two daughters within a year of each other, but to make matters worse, authorities seemed uninterested in Jocelyn and Jade's cases, leaving Nicole to fight for answers. Not long after Jade's body was found, Gabby Petito disappeared from Wyoming, the same state as Jocelyn and Jade, but Nicole couldn't help but notice the way the media viewed Gabby's case compared to her two daughters. She was grateful for all the media and public attention focused on finding Gabby, but wished Jocelyn and Jade could get the same energy. We want to give a special thank you to Barbara Ann Green at Basin Republican Rustler. Barbara is a friend of Nicole, Jocelyn and Jade's mom, and wrote a series about missing and murdered Indigenous persons at that publication. She helped us access a great article she wrote about the girls that we were unable to find online, and she's one of few writers that spoke out about the girls as people and not statistics. And unfortunately, a lot of the articles we found about the girls really focused on, comparing their case to Gabby Petito's, but in that they didn't talk about the girls and they just talked about them as a statistic and continue to talk about Gabby's case still, which I think was the root of not the problem. We're very, very happy that Gabby got so much attention, but these girls
what they were
need
trying
more
to address.
attention. Yeah, for sure. But some sources we did find that did talk about the girls. We want to give a shout out to We Are Resilient and MMIW True Crime Podcast, which is so fantastic. We also found some information at county10.com. Again, the Basin Republican and Rustler, Medium, Vice, and more. For a full list of sources, check out our show notes.
If you found yourself here today, there's a good chance you already know a bit about the epidemic Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits have long been facing. Let's start by focusing on the situation in Wyoming. According to a report by the University of Wyoming, between 2010 and 2019, the homicide rate for Indigenous people was 26.8 times higher than the homicide rate for white people. Between 2011 and 2020, 710 Indigenous persons disappeared. 20% of the Indigenous people reported missing were missing for 30 or more days, which is almost double the percentage of white people missing for longer than 30 days, which is 11%. Then there's the difference in media coverage. Only 30% of Indigenous homicide victims had newspaper media coverage, as compared to 51% of white homicide victims. Indigenous female homicide victims had the least amount of newspaper media coverage at only 18%. The newspaper articles for Indigenous homicide victims were more likely to contain violent language, portray the victim in a negative light, and provide less information as compared to articles about white murder victims. While Native Americans make up only 3% of the population of Wyoming, they account for 21% of the homicides.
What little media coverage there is for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits often comes across as being victim blaming, mentioning drugs or alcohol in their systems as if they deserve to die because they were drinking. And it doesn't stop at the media. One of the biggest issues is really that coroners often list their deaths as accidental without determining the actual cause of death. We've heard far too many stories of Indigenous women ending up dead in the middle of nowhere, and the investigation stops there. Wyoming is the home to Wind River Reservation, and according to windriver.org, it's the 5th largest reservation in the U.S. by population and the 7th largest by landmass. It encompasses 2.2 million acres and is home for Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Arapaho tribes.
Jocelyn Watt moved to Riverton, Wyoming on the Wind River Reservation with her family when she was 4. She was born in Rinteln, West Germany, on January 28, 1999, to her parents, Daryl Davis and Nicole Ann Wagon. Her Indian name was Nihoni Haisai, which means yellow bird woman, which her mother later said really fit because Jocelyn loved to sing. The young family was living in Germany while her father was stationed there in the Air Force. Her mother, Nicole, said she didn't feel like she fit in well in Germany, and after attending a conference for women of color in D.C., she was able to embrace her Indigenous heritage for the first time. Jocelyn's family lived in West Germany for 2 years. Then her parents split up, and she moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, with her mom for 2 years, then settled in Riverton, Wyoming, where Jocelyn was enrolled in the tribe. On February 3rd, 1996, Jocelyn's little sister Jade was born in Riverton. Her Northern Arapaho Indian name was Cedar Tree Stands Alone, and her Northern Cheyenne name was White Buffalo Calf Woman.
The two girls grew up with 3 other sisters, Tiana, Trinity, and Jewel, and went to school around Riverton. Though their mom, Nicole, baptized them in the Catholic Church, the family all still practiced Native ways by attending sweats, fasting, and looked for guidance. They respected their elders. Their culture was really important to them. Jocelyn went to Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico for college and stayed around Albuquerque for 5 years before returning home to Riverton to be closer to her family. While back in Riverton, she worked as a server at the Red Willow restaurant in the Wind River Casino. Her coworkers were all close-knit and more like family. She was well-liked by customers because she was so kind and welcoming to everyone. She had this special way of making everyone feel valued and like they were home. But she really stood out at work the most because she was known for her ability to serenade the regulars for their birthdays. She had a voice.
She loved to sing and never hesitated to share her talent around the community. She was part of the Sand Creek Band and was the opening singer of the national anthem at a rodeo in 2018. She even performed at funerals in the community, often singing a song, Dancing in the Sky. She loved to be outdoors and spent time fishing and going to the lake with her sisters. She was adventurous, loved to travel, and did not hesitate to try new things. She was always learning and growing and had been pursuing a career in optometry, working as an optician. She was a big fan of the New England Patriots and shared that love with her partner, Rudy Perez. The two would go to games together, even traveling out of state. Her partner, Rudy, was from Rhode Island, but had moved to the Riverton area in 2016. He was a motorcycle enthusiast and worked as an electrician.
Early in January of 2019, Nicole realized it was time to check on Jocelyn. The family was close, but it wasn't unlike them to go days at a time without checking in, especially since the new year had just passed and things were always busy around the holidays. On January 5th, Nicole made a mental note to visit Jocelyn. Jocelyn had been planning a road trip, and Nicole wanted to make sure she got to see her daughter before she left. But on the days leading up to January 5th, she had a bad feeling. Nicole has said, quote, "I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good for those couple days. And what can I explain to you is leading up to the day I received the call. It just felt like a sense, a feeling, and I couldn't shake it." On the 5th, she received a call that confirmed that sinking feeling. "I received a call that day from my aunt, and I could hear in her voice, and it was full of panic," Nicole said. "And I already had a not good feeling and just connected everything. As soon as I got to my daughter's residence to see all that law enforcement, I knew it wasn't good."
Inside Jocelyn's house on the 1100 block of East Main Street in Riverton, police found the bodies of 30-year-old Jocelyn and 30-year-old Rudy in their bedroom. Jocelyn was found face down in her bed, having been shot twice in her head. Rudy appeared to have struggled with the assailant and had been shot twice in the head and once in the bicep. It was a wake-up call for Nicole and her daughters when there seemed to be no movement in Jocelyn and Rudy's murders. Nicole turned to social media, begging friends to share Jocelyn's story and urging friends to contact law enforcement with any leads. She got involved in the tribal council and became an advocate for missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. She said of her activism, quote, "If you ever knew my oldest daughter, Jocelyn, she was so protective of her family. Nothing would stop her. If this happened to me, my daughter would have stopped at nothing to make sure there was justice for her mom. That's what keeps me going," end quote.
But it wasn't just Nicole who got involved in the fight. Her younger sister, 22-year-old Jade, got involved too. She too marched at protest in Laramie and Riverton and fought for justice for Jocelyn. Jade, like her sister, loved being outside and had an adventurous, free spirit. She was known for her smile and her laugh that everyone described as cute, one of a kind, and memorable, and I really wish I could hear her laugh because everyone talks about it. She was artistic and loved to draw, write, and listen to music. She loved being in the mountains and spending time fishing with her family. She had a passion for traveling around the U.S. Jade had 2 kids, Malia and Raphael, who are now 6 and 4 years old, and had been a stay-at-home mom since she was 19. She had been interested in pursuing a job in medicine and was about to start classes at Wind River Job Corps.
And then tragedy struck again as Nicole realized Jade disappeared not even a year after her sister was murdered. Nicole last saw her on December 30th. She'd been going through a tough time, and Nicole had already been worried about her now oldest daughter. She was dealing with domestic violence from her partner and had been dealing with the trauma of losing her sister not even a year earlier. She was in a bad place. Her family had been trying to reach her by phone, and it wasn't like Jade to not pick up or text back. On January 2nd, 2020, Jade was last seen inside the Shoshone Rose Casino. She was seen leaving with unknown parties.
Her mom had a bad feeling when Jade didn't show up for a memorial the family had planned for the anniversary of Jocelyn's murder. According to Nicole, quote, "I knew there's no way that she would have missed that, so I knew something was wrong." She reported her daughter missing on January 3rd. This was not the first time Jade had disappeared. Jade vanished in August of 2019, and while we don't have all the details of what happened, she was taken against her will and made a harrowing escape. The person who took her went to jail.
On January 4th, Nicole was at church with her daughter, Jewel. While at church, a bad feeling swept over her. "Mom, did you feel that?" Nicole could always feel the pain of her daughters when they cried, and she could feel the same despair as Jewel. She knew her daughter was dead. Nicole and Jade's sisters contacted the media, posted to social media, and fought to get her name out there. Nicole had been through this before, once with Jocelyn in January of the prior year, and once with Jade in August. There were a couple of write-ups on local news sites about her disappearing, but they provided very little information regarding what she was wearing, who she was with, or how her mom knew she was missing. Most articles mentioned that the police hadn't provided any further information than the fact that she was at the casino, and some articles didn't even mention the casino.
It's pretty challenging to get the public's attention with so little information to peek at. It's hard for the public to feel invested in someone's story if the only information they're being provided is the name and height of a potential victim. We don't want to bring any negativity to Gabby Petito's case or her family because she deserved to be found and deserved to get justice. But think of the way her disappearance was publicized with so many photos and personal bits of information about her life. You couldn't help but feel close to her and want to help. We love that she received so much coverage and love seeing everyone band together to help, but we just wish Jade would have received the same attention to detail. Jade's family has publicly spoken about the way her and Jocelyn's cases were basically missing from the news, and her sister, Tiana, spoke with Wyoming public media about the lack of coverage.
With Gabby's case, I've seen comments on posts about people saying, "Oh, Gabby was left." That's why people shared her story. My sister was left. She had kids. She had a family that cared for her. Her mom reached all the news outlets. We tried. We posted on what we were able to, and nobody cared. She was an adult, is what they said with Jade's case. Gabby was an adult. So I see all these comparisons, but that's what it is, and no one wants to accept it. It's a race issue. It really is. With the media, with how the justice system works, like I said, it's just not fair. But part of me feels like if they just cared just a little bit, or if they just tried a little bit harder, if they posted her story sooner, would have we found my sister alive? Because my mom filed the missing person on January 3rd. She was found the week of the 21st. County 10, K2 News, all of our surrounding areas of Fremont County and elsewhere, they didn't cover her story until that very week we found her. So it was just crazy the amount of attention that Gabby had received. Like my mom had said, she feels for that mom, feels for Gabby's mom. She knows that pain of burying your daughter, burying your kids before their time. So I just feel like we all need to do better as far as treating each other's lives with respect and loving one another, because life's too short.
On January 16th, 2 weeks after Jade was last seen alive, the FBI joined the investigation. We did a little digging as to when and why the FBI would get involved in a missing person case, and found the answer from our friend and fellow podcaster, Jerry Williams. Jerry served as a special agent in the FBI for 26 years and answered our question for us on her website, jerrywilliams.com. She was asked this question quite a bit during the search for Gabby and why the FBI had been involved in her search. And here was her response. Quote, "The FBI will officially open and lead a missing person investigation when foul play is suspected and the victim's last known whereabouts was on federal property, such as a federal park, an Indian reservation, or the victim was on board a commercial ship in international waters. The missing person is a U.S. president or other elected appointed federal officials, such as cabinet members and members of Congress, or is a federal judge, a federal prosecutor, or a federal law enforcement official, such as an FBI, DEA, IRS, or Secret Service agent, and their missing person status is believed to be related to their official employment," end quote. So it appears that the FBI did initially have a reason to suspect foul play was involved.
On July 21st, 3 weeks after Jade was last seen alive, her body was found by BIA officers on the Wind River Indian Reservation. She was found dead in a field near Cady, Wyoming, which was about 10 miles away from the Shoshone Rose Casino. We want to address that coverage of how Jade was found has been sparse, and the few sources that did report on her disappearance and discovery have conflicting information. In all of the podcasts we listened to about Jade's case, they mentioned that she was found 30 miles away from the casino, but we could not find any media coverage that mentioned this, and that wouldn't be the case according to Google Maps. However, some articles did say she disappeared from the Wind River Casino, which would have been closer to 30 miles from the field where she was found, though in an interview with Nicole, she specifically mentioned the Shoshone Rose Casino. Either way, Jade still ended up dead and alone in a field in the middle of nowhere on the Wind River Reservation at just the age of 23. According to a statement released by the FBI, an examination of the scene did not reveal apparent evidence of a violent or traumatic incident. On January 24, 2020, Jade was positively identified. No vehicle had been found.
According to a coroner at the Forensic Sciences Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, there was no evidence of significant trauma, and her cause of death was hypothermia and acute methamphetamine intoxication. This probably sounds familiar, since Indigenous women apparently just wander off and die of hypothermia on a regular basis. We attempted to find statistics on the number of white people with a cause of death determined to be hypothermia compared to Indigenous people, and were unable to find any studies. But if any of you listeners are librarians or just very good researchers, we'd love to hear from you. According to the report, the level of meth in Jade's system could have caused confusion or irrational behavior, but seemingly not enough for an overdose. It's unclear if Jade had been using meth, but even if she had, she still deserved a search party, and she still deserved the attention of law enforcement and the media. We were unable to find information on her time of death and whether she died the day she went missing and had been in the elements that long, or if it's possible she died closer to the time she was found. Her cause of death was listed as accidental by the coroner.
According to Weather Underground, the high for Riverton, Wyoming on January 2nd, 2020 was 6 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 14 degrees Celsius, with a low of negative 11 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 23 degrees Celsius. So what was Jade doing alone in a field with freezing cold temperatures? There was no vehicle found nearby, so was she just going for a walk on one of the coldest days of the year and at least 10 miles to maybe up to 30 miles alone on foot? And regarding the notation by the coroner that there was no apparent evidence of a traumatic incident, we as a true crime community are also aware that cause of death such as strangulation or suffocation often leave no signs of trauma on the body. Barbara Ann Green, the journalist from Basin Republic Register, spoke with the sheriff in charge of Jade's case, and according to him, her case is closed. He said Jade is listed as a drop-off, meaning somebody literally just dropped her off in the field in freezing temperatures. According to Nicole, there was a person of interest questioned at one point who could have been involved in Jade's death, but as of now, there is no investigation into her mysterious death. Let's come back to Jocelyn and Rudy's murder. Their case sat unsolved for almost 3 years. And then in December of 2021, 4 men were finally arrested. Patrick Son Rhodes Jr. and Bryce Turan have each been charged with 2 counts of felony murder. Corbin Headley has been charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit aggravated burglary, and Brandon Monroe with 2 felony murder charges and 2 murder in the first-degree charges. According to their accounts, Bryce, who was 22 at the time, picked up the other 3 in his truck to drive around and drink on the night of January 3rd, 2019. The 4 of them drove around while drinking, and after a while, they stopped at 16-year-old Brandon's house for meth and a small caliber gun.
According to Patrick, who was 15 at the time, Brandon smoked meth and then said he needed to go to Riverton to take care of some business. He loaded the gun as they drove. Patrick was concerned about Brandon having a gun and asked Bryce if he could take him home. Bryce declined. Patrick noticed that 2 of the boys in the truck were wearing rival gang colors. When they got to Riverton, Bryce parked his truck behind Jocelyn's home. Brandon told Patrick to come with him and then used his shoulder to force open the back door, breaking the window in the process. According to Patrick, he heard gunshots after Brandon went into Jocelyn's bedroom. Then he heard a man's voice saying, "What the fuck are you doing here?" When Patrick walked into the bedroom, he saw Rudy struggling with Brandon, who said, "Get the fuck off me." He watched Brandon shoot Rudy twice in the head. He also saw Jocelyn lying face down on the other side of the bed, shaking. Rudy had been shot twice in his head and once in his bicep. Jocelyn had 2 bullets and 1 fragment in her head. There were 5 bullets found, all from the same gun. On December 2nd of 2022, Bryce, the driver, entered a plea deal to plead no contest to the aiding and abetting felony charge, which carries a maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment and $10,000 fine, in return for his testimony during the trials of the other 3 men. Brandon, Patrick, and Corbin are still awaiting trial.
Nicole, who has always been interested in activism, has since run for tribal council and been active with the nonprofit Not Our Native Daughters, which was created for the education and awareness of the missing, exploited, murdered Indigenous women and children. She also provided testimony for Savannah's Act, which was passed in October of 2020. According to IndianLaw.org, the law, quote, clarifies federal, state, tribal, and local law enforcement responsibilities with respect to missing and murdered Indians, aims to increase communication and coordination between federal, tribal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, improves tribal access to resources and information such as federal criminal information databases and local law enforcement agencies, improves tribal access to resources and information such as federal criminal information databases needed to respond effectively to missing and murdered Indian cases, requires data collection related to missing and murdered Indian people, regardless of where they reside, and directs U.S. attorneys to develop regionally appropriate guidelines for responding to missing and murdered Indians. Nicole and her daughters are still seeking justice for Jocelyn and Jade. If you have any information about either of their deaths, we encourage you to contact law enforcement.
It's super frustrating just to have to, sometimes I'm really interested in how the cases that we talk about seem to connect to one another, and like noting a reference to one episode from another one is like kind of interesting to see that web, but like it's also very frustrating to see just prevalent themes like she's an adult. She can, do what she wants. And also we don't have to care about her disappearance or report on it because it's not like it's a missing kid or something. Right. But like, as Tiana said, that's what they said to them, that Jade was an adult. And when she was comparing against Gabby, it's like Gabby Petito is also an adult.
Right. I think they were close in age. Like Jade was only 23.
Yeah. And there's so many sensational stories which are most certainly about adults, and people who just don't fit the explanation that they give as to why people have more coverage.
Yeah, it's like so ridiculous. Like as an adult, if I come up missing, I would like it to be investigated, please. Like,
yes, yeah, we are all important. Like that's why these jobs exist for, investigative officers, because every person matters. Go find every person that goes
Right?
missing, or at least
And,
try.
Jade had already been kidnapped once. She was kidnapped and escaped, and her person that kidnapped her was prosecuted. So
sadly, I feel like I could see like cops and certain authorities be like, oh, that to me means it matters less. Like this is a pattern or something and a less important situation.
Yeah. And I feel like they used it as an excuse of like, oh, she has a tendency to like wander off and not be in contact. But that's not the case. That's not what happened here.
Right. So what are you watching?
I did watch one thing that is not true crime, but it is in like spooky vein. That's not exactly incredibly new, but I think maybe they're still airing episodes. Interview with the Vampire TV series.
Oh, right. I vaguely heard that existed, but I know very little about it. Like, who's in it? How is it?
Well, I think that the only person that I recognize as being famous is, I don't know the actor's name, but he played Grey Worm in Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting.
And he's just so great and he's so handsome. And I was like, where do I know him from? Like, he looks so familiar. And then I looked it up and he's, of course, in Game of Thrones. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. And the other guy, like, it's a very handsome Australian guy that I've never seen in things before. But I've only seen 2 episodes, but it's like a great like queer version finally of the story because we like, as far as I'm aware, I haven't ever read Interview with a Vampire, but from what I've been told, it is queer. And then they kind of like sort of alluded to it with the Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise version, although I haven't seen it in so many years. I don't recall that, but I might have been too young to like know what was happening when I saw it.
I think vampire lore in general is pretty queer. I mean, they're generally just pretty ready to get sexy with whoever. So
yeah, I agree.
It's cool.
And but this like it's great. Like it's just great. The representation is definitely better. And like it does a really good job of like showing life as a Black man in the early 1900s in New Orleans. And I didn't know that this was true, and I would like to do a little bit more research, but allegedly, like my husband was just telling me this morning that there were Black plantation owners and such that were no longer enslaved people. And I don't know how much of that is accurate, but that's definitely what is being depicted in the show. And it's really like, it's really just like lovely to see. And, he's the main character is like a business owner and like whatever. And I wasn't sure like if they were like, they're clearly not whitewashing it. It's clearly not just like putting a Black man in this situation that didn't exist, like pretending slavery didn't exist and whatever. So they're not doing that. And I would love to look more into that history because it's something I don't know anything about. So I'm really enjoying it. I had only downloaded 2 episodes last night, but I will definitely be rushing through that as soon as the rest of it as soon as possible.
Cool.
How about you?
Well, I started watching a show that's also kind of old. It's probably even older, but it's called The Society. Have you seen any of that or heard of that? It's like a twist on like Lord of the Flies or something, but we don't know if this is like purposely staged or accidentally happened or what. But it's like in a high school, it's a bunch of teenagers. They go on a trip out of town with the school, and then they wind up coming back, and there's nobody in the town. It's just them, and nobody ever comes back, and they can't get out of the town, so they have to just start over. So that's cool and creepy, but not true or anything. But fun. And I also, at your recommendation, went to see The Menu in theaters, which was great.
Oh, good.
It was definitely not at all what I expected after talking to you about it and after watching a trailer, but it was just great anyway. So
I've heard it's just wonderful and very funny.
Yeah.
Was it funny?
It's funny. Like, it's not, I wouldn't say very funny.
Okay.
It's not like it's always feeling fun. It's just kind of like cheeky. And I will say that Louis, working in restaurants for many, many years of his life, he was like, I love this. And I totally get the point.
I love
it. So very, very good.
That's
very entertaining.
Awesome. All right. Well, I have to go see that then.
Well, I I guess that's enough murder for 1 week. If you disagree and could stand more murder than this one show can contain, you can always find us on the OG MurderMurder.news for the latest breaking true crime news all week long.
You can also find us on Instagram at MurderMurderNews, on Twitter at MurderNews, on TikTok at MurderMurderNews. You can find us on Facebook just by searching for our page by looking for MurderMurder News.
And while you're on Facebook searching for Murder Murder News, you'll also see our group pop up. You'll want to join us there to be more active in the MMN community, and you'll definitely want to be a member of that group if you want in on our virtual book club. We're just getting started on our next selection, The Poisoner's Handbook, Murder and the Birth of Forensic Medicine in Jazz Age New York by Deborah Bloom. We'll meet to discuss the book on Zoom on Sunday, January 29th, and we hope to see some new faces there.
Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help new fans find the show. And make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode.
Thanks for listening.
Bye, spooky friends.